Okay, so welcome. It's so good to see you. We saw you on Paula's show the other night. I'm glad we catch you before you're on a plane today or something, so I'm glad we caught up with you.
It's great to be here, Harold.
It's great to have you here. And in the audience, welcome very, very much to Conversations. We have filling in, just before they leave New York, they've been here, two guests, a man and wife, or a couple, and on my immediate left is Ramana Clarke. And on the far left is Shanti Ramana Clarke. And they are involved with, and we'll be showing a clip from on the computer and on the screen. And they also have a DVD here that we're going to be showing a clip from called The Hemp Solution for a Sustainable Future, which has a great deal of the attention of a great deal of the world as the world begins to awaken. It seems to me, I'm going to try and get a sense of it, awaken to the error of our having demonized what is called cannabis and caused great damage within the human society all around the world. And I'm sorry, I'm editorializing, but welcome both. Very much you're welcome to Conversations. We were just chatting about change. How does humanity or the evolution of consciousness, how do you deal with major transformative changes? And it seems to me that's the case, but welcome.
Thank you.
Share a little bit of your background. I hear an Australian accent, and it's good to talk to somebody from down under, but share a little bit of your background, then we'll talk about, the hemp solution and marijuana and the transformation that I think we agree is going on in the world around that issue. Yeah.
Well, we both grew up in Sydney on the northern beaches. And, I actually came to New York for 7 years in the late 70s and early 80s. And
what were you doing then? What were you doing? You going to college?
I was a street vendor and an illegal alien at first.
Illegal alien, good. Welcome,
I married an American and I got a green card and I went to Queen's College and then I went to Friends World College based at Long Island. Quaker-based, yeah.
That's interesting. How did you go to a Quaker school? Was it your own philosophy that you were following? Peaceful?
Well, I liked the school because it was a school with no walls and it allowed you to study in Costa Rica, or I wanted to study and learn about Central America and the politics and the language.
Costa Rica is a wonderful country.
Yeah. I was very drawn to go there, so I went down there with the woman I was with at the time. And then graduated from there. So I'm actually a graduate of the State University of New York, because Friends World College is under SUNY. So
very good.
I'm a New Yorker as well, and partly had 7 years here.
All right, very good.
And then I moved to LA, and then back
I was
to
trying to explain to you avenues and streets, and I lived for 7 years, so but that accent precedes you, and so
I'm quite familiar. I found it was an advantage to keep my accent while I was over here, because New Yorkers love an Aussie accent.
Absolutely.
They go, how you doing, dude? And I go, g'day, mate, how you going?
There you go. Yeah, that's true. They really do.
They do. So actually I came back to Australia speaking more Australian than when I left.
Australian, that's great. That Foster's beer is associated with it,
Foster's
too.
is good,
And I think they like it. Do the old folks in Australia still call England home? Do they used to
No.
Not too long ago, they used to call it home because it was from a colony of Britain.
Well, that's a bit poo-pooed these days, but
it is poo-pooed. Yeah.
We still have the Union Jack on our flag and the Queen on our coins.
There you go, right, and that's something we can get back to. Because one of the themes we're going to talk about is change, and how does humanity make changes and stop things that have been doing wrong, and that's a big theme. But about yourself, you're also a native Australian.
I'm a native Aussie girl, yes, and not quite as complicated and as exotic as Sol's life has been, but a very well-grounded, free-thinking person from my youth. Not classically political or greeny, but very much interested in the transformational aspects of our times. As a civilization, I have been passionate about. I'm really looking deeply into that context. Right. So that's what spurred my my universal spirituality, my interest in what's going on the planet as a whole. I took nursing as a profession, so I'm in the compassionate arts.
Were you a registered nurse?
I'm a registered nurse,
I have great respect for registered nurses. It's a heck of a discipline they go through.
It's a beautiful job, and I'm still working in a hospital setting. within the wards, and also having been involved with Sol, and I met him at the beginning of this project. So I've been involved from the onset and have been very aligned with...
She pops up several times as an actress. And on this new version, she's contributed music. She's a great songwriter and musician, and she's contributed a couple of the soundtracks.
All right, very good. That's all very good. That's the piece we're going to throw a clip of and so forth.
No, we won't have that
my
clip of her
segment doesn't
music.
come in on that.
Oh, we're not the music, but we're going to have a clip.
Yes,
there'll be a clip.
That
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. So this question we're talking about, we were going to be doing a program with our dear friend Paula Gloria and Joe Barton, who are doing great work, it seems to us, here in showing the or riding the wave, I would think, in the crest of the wave, like a surfer of the renaissance of or the birth of an understanding by the society that the war on hemp that has been part of, McCaffrey and all that kind of stuff was really a very big mistake, ending up with many people in prison for something that has been not only not detrimental, but it's actually had huge beneficial implications for thousands of years perhaps, and we really made a really big mistake in terms of filling our prisons with young men or women that took a puff on a marijuana cigarette. And that's now surfacing, particularly with the idea that you got medical uses of this that can be curative. Joe Simpson and so forth is coming out. Actually,
Rick
Simpson,
Canada,
and they're highlighting that. And Joe's been on the leading edge of Joe Barton, and that's how we happen to be here. And you all are picking up on that in Australia. And I'm sensing it as a citizen. That's correct. They're really questioning now. Medical marijuana is becoming legal in the minds of many, or at least in a different status. All of this. So, am I correct? It's a major transformation of addressing a major mistake that the society has perpetrated over these last decades, since maybe 1937 or so. Or
Hopefully,
share with me,
Hopefully that is what's happening. I mean, there's still a lot of activism going on, and there's still a huge need for fundamental education, that people can really make the shift from the negative to the positive, or the fear-based to the acceptance of something deeply valuable. So this issue seems to reflect that, and the really sort of hard edge of that is the the human rights issue of peaceful, non-criminal people incarcerated, and the laws that need to be repealed for those people to get out of jail, and laws to prevent that ever happening again for a substance that has only a peaceful contribution to make to our society.
Never has been a death attributed to the overuse of it, or never in the history, and for thousands of years has been medicinally used and
Absolutely.
so forth.
And yet all the other substances that are much more toxic and much more acceptable in our society is, are there and a part of our living. So it really is still very much, certainly in Australia, it's much more active here, but we really need to educate people from a very grassroots level.
Okay, I wonder if because I'm thinking political, and if I may, the theme here is how does humanity deal with transformation of systems that are becoming a change? How do they deal with change in a large scale, particularly if it's widely implicated in terms of the human condition and that kind of thing? It's hard. People get used to situations that are ingrained in the law and so forth, and then they get, and history has a great hold, and we have to anchor things to history.
Well, change is happening.
And change is happening.
History is the story of human change. So change is a natural part, and you could just say it's natural evolution. And sometimes sometimes we make changes for the worse, like when the cannabis plant was prohibited, and that happened in the United States in the 30s after
Anslinger.
After a whole, there's various names, and DuPont Chemicals come up, and Hearst with his timber interests for paper.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
in the West Coast, and there's various names like that, and the documentary goes goes deeply into the history of prohibition. But on the subject of change now, there is change happening in Europe. There's a big industrial hemp movement happening, and a big movement for marijuana medicine, especially in countries like the Netherlands and Spain and other countries. In fact, Pharmaceutical Field magazine, which is published in Europe, reported that there's a cannabis revolution going on in Europe regarding,
I like that term,
regarding hemp medicine to be used there. And that revolution is also happening here in the United States, where there's 13 states, as you know, that have legalized.
Is it? I know Michigan.
Medicine.
I'm from Michigan originally. They had legalized it.
Yeah, and I've heard of Boston on the East Coast recently, just in the last few weeks, has also legalized cannabis medicine, and in California is probably the most advanced. It's where it sort of the movement began in the States.
That's California. They're always jumping off into the future.
San Francisco.
God bless San Francisco and Berkeley. Yes,
that's right. So San Francisco is really spearheading that movement right now. And they're voting this November for the legalization of marijuana. Some people are critiquing that. The way that law is written, because they're saying it's too much control still. But I nevertheless, it's a step in the right direction. And this is happening at a rapid rate around the globe, that people are awakening to how this plant can help us medically, but also environmentally. And that's the very big issue with the hemp plant.
Environmentally, spell that out a little.
Okay, well, hemp is probably the longest and strongest fibre in the plant kingdom. Certainly,
is that true?
Certainly, it was the backbone of our fibre usage in Europe for hundreds of years. It was the backbone of all the sailing ships, all the sails, all the ropes, all the cork, all the stuff that sealed the boards between the wood of the ships, all the sailors' clothing, all the uniforms.
Clothing was made of hemp?
Oh, yeah, this is all hemp clothing.
It's not associated with... Well, that's very handsome. Let me feel the...
Jeans, shirts.
That's hemp.
That's beautiful. Yeah, that's very nice. It feels like cotton.
And this is beautiful hemp.
And they used to have linen. Isn't linen a thing that's used? Linen
you could call that linen.
It's much nicer than...
No, but linen's not associated with the hemp properties or something like that?
The hemp fibre makes them a very superior
hemp
fabric.
fibre, and then they used it for cordage, didn't they? And George Washington grew it, Thomas Jefferson grew it.
But I think the big advantage of it, if I may interrupt,
yes,
the big advantage of hemp over cotton is that it doesn't require all the chemicals and herbicides and pesticides that the cotton crop uses, and the water.
It's a weed.
It just grows naturally. Because it has so much foliage, it just simply stops all the other plants from competing with it. And because it has a little bit of the cannabinoids in it, it's insect resistant.
It's what?
It's what? Insect resistant.
Okay.
But there are strains that are now being allowed to be grown as for industrial hemp, where they've bred out the marijuana, the THC. So industrial hemp, there are strains where they grow in Europe and in other countries where there's no drug, or virtually no drug, in the crop. So the drug issue should not be an issue with industrial hemp. There are strains that could grow across the United States and produce fibre for clothing, fibre for paper, instead of using the timber, instead of using all the...
Beautiful what?
Beautiful paper.
Really?
Yeah.
Really high quality.
Art
really
quality?
Thin.
Any quality. Any quality paper.
The thin biblical paper was originally hemp because it's so strong.
It's been there for thousands of years.
The first paper ever printed on was hemp paper.
Was that true? You know, is that validated?
Yeah, probably.
I associate it with China. Am I off base?
700 AD was the first paper ever printed on in China, and also the first paper made was hemp paper too in China. And the Chinese have continued to grow hemp, and all these clothes now come from China. China are really capitalising on their ancient indigenous hemp crop right now, and their hemp for fibre industry is expanding at a rapid rate, along with their hemp for paper industry.
Okay, that's very interesting. My friend Paula had she's followed this interest and everything, like our friend and everything, and she had at the end of one of the television programs she had a combine harvesting hemp, and you got the thing where it's made to be able to harvest it, but not just a little plant or two in the backyard or something like people are trying to surreptitiously, or in the roof or something like that, but just fields of the stuff by a combine, like as far as the eye can see, there would be hemp growing.
He's got on his computer a combine shot.
He's got a combine shot on his computer. That's good. Yeah, they've got that. So that's the thing as far as hemp is concerned, and and it's interesting that they were trying to take, and they could take the what do you call it, the psychoactive aspect of cannabis, I guess, out of it and grow it and that sort of thing.
Well, that has created a problem, and the little clip that you're going to play of the video does talk more about that, so I won't talk
That's
about
not
that
the
right
ideal
now.
mindset to have around hemp. I mean, really, we
No,
have
but
to get out of that fear-based and, I mean, also on the agricultural level with the cannabinoids,
Yeah.
they are the protector of the plant. They keep the plant resistant
to ultraviolet radiation.
So there's no reason that
rays.
we would want to have
You
that
wouldn't
taken
wanna
away
take
from
it
the plant. It
away.
would be a healthier plant if that is there.
Yes,
Okay.
and
All right.
a more substantial and consistent crop. If
Right.
you leave your cannabinoids in,
Yeah.
and we just get over the whole thing, like we really deal with it
Yeah.
at a very fundamental level, that error.
Right.
So that we can make that transformative change.
Well, that brings you around to something, and we want to get to. We'll show the clip soon. We're 15 minutes. We can show that clip very quickly and everything. But it comes around to things like if you put it another analogy, or you get an analog to it, or something like that. Let's say weapons. Okay, weapons are something, and we have a dispute with Iran now about they cannot have an atomic reactor that could make enriched uranium, or they had that when they bombed a reactor unit in an atomic reactor unit in Iraq. The Israelis did, and they said that might lead to the possibility that could possibly lead to where they would obtain an atomic weapon or something, and so that would be like a gateway. And they say they have this idea of it's preventive obliteration of people to be able to do. France gets about 80% of its electricity from atomic generation and so forth. But it's also dangerous because you could have somebody create a weapon. And they had sanctions on to where with this dual use, they say dual use, something might be able to become a threat, or be able to get into it. It seems peaceful, but it might become a threat. So it's gateway, because the gateway argument for the marijuana, I presume, has been there because you're going to go straight to heroin or something. People would make that argument, you understand. But this idea...
It's not a sound argument, though, Harold.
Okay, we'll get to that. As far as but I'm trying to get cannabis, not within just the cannabis thing, but within a larger context of humanity dealing with change and possible risk and so forth, because that's inherent now. And I had a friend, we did a program, and they were putting opposite. No, they weren't allowing the importation into Iraq when we were leading up to where we were going to bomb and shock and all and everything like that. That they weren't allowing there to be imported pencils because they could take the graphite, possibly shave it down and make it into a gunpowder.
It just reflects
pencils
an
for the
insane
children.
society.
The point being is this idea of how do you deal with change and how do you deal with the people who are going to say the gateway issue, which seems to be probably an important one at the level of cannabinoids and that kind of stuff. And do you understand what I'm saying?
Well, I think
it's okay for some people but not for others. The idea it's okay for some people to have overwhelming power. Others can't. You can't allow others to do it. So there's a lot of issues about dealing with change, and particularly if you bring it into social justice, that sort of thing. Do you understand what I'm saying? Or do you understand the analogy, perhaps, to larger issues beyond somebody smoking pot and listening to Jimi Hendrix, you know?
Yeah. Well, I think it's keeping the issue unified.
Yeah.
So that, if the grassroots element of good education means that all the issues, that the whole picture can be seen clearly.
Exactly. It's comprehensive. Yeah,
and
that's
so
right.
with that clarity and with a very unified perspective, we can see the fundamental nature of the error, and we can see the pathway forward that's clear and sound. And because it's sound, then and because it's unified, then it's not, the mind isn't splitting off so radically about the good and evil aspects of the situation, or the possible negative implications of legalizing it, and what's going to happen. All the kids are going to go crazy because they're going to start smoking all this weed. It just becomes ridiculous.
It does, but it's the stuff of propaganda, and that's what we've been submitted to.
And that's why the
propaganda
education
campaign,
needs
which
to
probably has economic interest behind it too, for certain people, and also a mindset that ought to be questioned. We thought we had a perfect right to go and drop napalm on little babies in Vietnam because there was a greater communist threat. All of these kind of things.
There are a lot of economic
How do
interests.
we make a peace with or subsume outdated institutions we've inherited, and we reify in all our institutions is a larger issue.
I think we have to have a positive positive vision of an alternative, and that is being demonstrated now, and that's what this documentary is designed to show.
Right.
Is that it doesn't have to be a threat. Sure, it might be a threat.
Now you're talking cannabis.
The whole hemp.
Yeah, right. The whole hemp. Right.
Hemp may be a threat to existing industries that it might replace.
It may be a threat to certain mindsets. It might be well to have them knocked out of the park anyway.
Exactly. It may be a threat to that. But change is often a threat. Like good change for the better is often a threat to people that resist it. That's a natural process. But that is not stopping hemp from coming
evolving,
back.
It's making a comeback, and well, it should.
It's always been the plant that we've had a symbiotic relationship with as humans, and the hemp plant goes way back into the Stone Age.
It does. I know.
Symbiotic.
The first civilizations of humans was the first camps that they found. They used hemp for clothing, and they probably used it for medicine as well.
And maybe they smoked it around the fire.
The first plants that were cultivated by human beings were the drug plants.
Is that right? Yeah, really.
And cannabis was one of those plants that was the first cultivated plant for its drug, for its medicine.
Right.
And probably used as a ritual as well as a medicinal plant.
Yeah, you see cadfile.
As old as humans have lived.
Yeah.
And that relationship with hemp then developed into paper, into all the sailing ship industry with the cords and the fibre and all the other uses.
Right.
Now, with today's technology, we have 5,000 farmers in France growing hemp for the automotive industry, for BMWs and for Mercedes-Benz interior car panellings and other cellulose-based products, which is the basis for organic plastics.
Okay.
So there's and then in England they just built the largest building out of hemp.
This is a great building.
Called the Adnams Brewery. So now they're making hemp into building blocks and making huge buildings. And the hemp blocks are locking up. The blocks are locking up carbon dioxide.
This is a great element in the hemp development is the building products.
A fantastic way to sequester carbon dioxide is to grow an acre of hemp, turn that into building blocks, lock the carbon dioxide into the blocks, and build a house. And these houses are actually carbon negative, whereas to build a normal conventional house uses 450 tonnes of carbon dioxide that goes into the atmosphere. But you can actually make a hemp neutral or negative house, carbon dioxide negative.
And it's just the stalks with a bit of lime and water. Like it's really non-toxic, it's really straightforward, and there's a simplicity and a supremacy in that as a development in the building industry.
It's great. I'm really glad that's part of the larger thing. So you have this, the hemp solution, and we're going to play a clip of it.
Okay.
Right? And I guess, could you maybe, as they say, set it up? Are you going to be showing the beginning, or what is it? And what is the overall, how long is the overall piece that you have?
It's an hour and a half.
Yeah, okay. And
the first third is all the industrial uses of the hemp. The second third is about the medicine and all the modern medical breakthroughs and understanding about hemp. Because in 1974, the United States government, at studies at in Virginia, discovered that THC kills cancer cells in laboratory animals.
That's Rick Simpson.
And then a dozen university studies around the world have now confirmed that. And the United States has now patented all the cannabinoids in the cannabis hemp plant for medical use. And if you look at the US patent for cannabis, which is all top secret, they're not public. Their public statement, the federal government the public statement is that cannabis has no medicinal use. But if you look at their patent, which has the United States government's name on it, you'll see that they've found and patented the cannabis and the cannabinoids in the hemp plant to cure a whole range
Who holds those patents, and is that part of a full, could you get a Freedom of Information Act report of the...
absolutely. It's in the public domain, it's on the internet.
It is, so that's available.
It's in my film.
That's in the film and everything. Well, there's a lot of it. What's the third part? You said there was a third.
The third part is looking at marijuana and its use and how the society might deal with marijuana. And the best example I had to show that was the Dutch example. So I interviewed the head of policy for the Dutch government, who says that here in Holland we treat it as a health and welfare issue. It's not for the police and the courts. It's a health and welfare issue. And their policy, since they brought their policy in, less people have been using cannabis in Holland less of the local people are using cannabis than when it was prohibited. So their policy is a great example of a more sane policy that's working. It's still not total repeal of the prohibition, but it's a much saner policy and probably the best policy we have on the planet now.
It's a very progressive country, Netherlands, seems to me. They got these coffee shops.
Let's roll the DVD.
So let's set up the DVD.
This is going into
here. It's going now. It's going now. Okay.
You queued it up there.
Cannabis is not a health problem. The problem is that it promotes social values and attitudes which are unwelcome in capitalist market-based society. It's just that simple. A drug like coffee with a horrendous health profile compared to cannabis is completely welcomed into the marketplace and the home and the lifestyle of modern people. This is simply that we value certain states of mind and we fear and suspect others. And this is based entirely on value systems that are inculcated from above.
Clearly, the discussion as to how society should deal with marijuana is likely to continue for some time. But is marijuana the reason hemp is no longer the major industry it once was? After all, the industrial-grade hemp crop is usually almost free of THC. In fact, industrial hemp can be more effective at creating marijuana-free zones than prohibition ever was. Cross-pollination from industrial strains simply prevents drug strains from producing decent marijuana. Furthermore, the United Nations Single Convention on Drugs in 1985 states, "This convention shall not apply to the cultivation of the cannabis plant exclusively for industrial purposes, fibre and seed, or horticultural purposes." In spite of all this, the answer to the question is still partly a yes. Marijuana prohibition directly limits the full potential of industrial hemp. Firstly, hemp is only permitted to grow in the most remote locations. Then there are police checks on potential growers. Then application fees, licenses, policing fees, and marijuana testing fees for industrial crops can be many hundreds and even thousands of dollars per year. If, through no fault of the farmer, the crop exceeds the ridiculously low legal THC level, the crop must be instantly destroyed. The cannabis plant developed THC to protect itself from ultraviolet rays and insects. The modern requirement to breed out THC compromises the cannabis plant's remarkable ability to cope with hot, dry conditions, high altitudes, and to be grown organically without the use of pesticides. And lastly, the present laws tend to promote large-scale production when hemp has a naturally useful place on small farms and in most backyard veggie gardens. But there are also other less obvious reasons for hemp's repression. Hemp historian Gatewood Galbraith speaks from his home state of Kentucky.
There are 14 of these historical markers around the central Kentucky commemorating hemp as a cash crop in the state. It's pretty self-explanatory. We were the world's largest producer for over 100 years.
How did hemp go from being a major crop to almost non-existence in a span of around 50 years?
Historical research conducted by our company suggests that it was the discovery of an efficient hemp decorticating machine and the promised resurgence of hemp to industry that led to the imposition of legal sanctions in the United States and the demise of the hemp industry.
In the early 1930s, the American hemp industry remained highly labour-intensive long after competing industries had mechanised. Furthermore, other fibres like manila hemp had begun to be imported from underdeveloped countries where labour was dirt cheap. By 1930, the hemp industry bottomed out at 1,000 acres. But hemp technology finally caught up, and the crop expanded to 14,000 acres in the next 7 years. Hemp was poised to become the new billion-dollar crop, as reported in popular mechanics and mechanical engineering magazines written in early 1938. A factory in Illinois had begun producing fine bond paper from hemp fibre. Hemp with its high cellulose content could also now be made into, quote, more than 25,000 products ranging from dynamite to cellophane and all manner of plastics. But in the mid-30s, DuPont Chemicals patented processes to make nylon and plastics from oil and coal.
Open the door.
A resurgence of the hemp industry would seriously have threatened the emerging petrochemical industries, with their synthetic fibre nylon being invented in 1935.
Hearst was a big printer back during the 20s and 30s, and he had vast interest in timberland for paper pulp, which could be used as a result of a chemically intensive paper pulp process developed by DuPont and patented by DuPont. They made their fortunes with these chemical shipments for the paper pulp industry. Hemp represented a less chemically intensive way of manufacturing a higher grade paper. Consequently, DuPont saw it as an economic competitor.
William Randolph Hearst, the owner of the largest newspaper chain in the United States between the world wars, started publishing newspaper articles linking cannabis with violent crime. They renamed the plant marijuana to dissociate it from the hemp medicines, the hemp robe and fabric that Americans had been using profitably for generations. Many stories in his papers told of blacks or Mexicans using marijuana and being disrespectful or violent to whites, or trying to push their drug to innocent whites. The campaign succeeded in getting racist white organisations to support cannabis prohibition. Hearst and Harry Anslinger, the then director of the Bureau of Narcotics, managed to get marijuana made illegal in 1937, thus destroying the hemp industries. This timing is interesting. The alcohol prohibition had just ended, and the people who had enforced it needed new jobs. This may well be why Anslinger pushed so hard to get cannabis banned.
In Anslinger's words, if the hideous monster Frankenstein came face to face with the monster marijuana, he would drop dead of fright. Reefer Madness was one of the many movies made to whip up an anti-marijuana frenzy.
The sale of marijuana is even more difficult to detect and halt than the traffic in drugs such as opium, morphine, and heroin. More deadly even than these soul-destroying drugs is the menace of marijuana. Under the influence of the drug, he killed his entire family with an axe. Incurably insane, a condition caused by the drug marijuana to which he was addicted. It is recommended, Your Honor, that the defendant be placed in an institution for the criminally insane for the rest of his natural life.
The prohibitionist mentality was abhorred by our founding fathers and by Lincoln and by every other great leader in America. They never had the power to prohibit, but they soon gave themselves the power to tax. The laws which outlawed marijuana were not prohibitive criminal statutes, they were tax acts. The 1937 Marijuana Tax Act, where an ounce of marijuana was taxed at $200, and it was selling on streets for $1.
At that time, congressmen voting on this piece of legislation were not aware that marijuana was hemp, cannabis hemp, that country had been using profitably for centuries. The hemp prohibition was initiated by American petrochemical companies in the 1930s to destroy the economic potential of hemp. It has nothing to do with the chemical effects of cannabis drugs or their perceived danger. It's a blatant case of industrial espionage to remove competition from evolving petrochemical substitutes for superior natural fibres.
Despite hemp being a major fibre crop in America and the world last century, mention of hemp has been erased from museums and textbooks. This display on the history of American textiles in Washington's Smithsonian Institute contains no mention of hemp. When asked why, museum curator Arkido replied, "Children don't need to know about hemp anymore, it confuses them." Similarly, in the National Textile Museum, there is no mention of hemp, either on display or in the library catalogue. Another example of the hemp cover-up was the attempted destruction of all traces of the US Department of Agriculture's film, Hemp for Victory. This film, made in 1942, was used to encourage patriotic US farmers to grow hemp for the war effort. After 45 years of burial in government archives, it was rediscovered in 1989 by hemp activists.
In 1942, 14,000 acres of fiber hemp were harvested in the United States. The goal for 1943 is 300,000 acres. Thus, hemp, Cannabis sativa, the old standby cordage fiber, is staging a strong comeback. American hemp will go on duty again. Hemp for mooring ships, hemp for tow lines, hemp for tackle and gear, hemp for countless naval uses, both on ship and shore. Hemp for victory.
Straight after the war, however, the government once again abolished the hemp industry and eventually criminalised the plant.
100 years ago, the farmer produced all of the fiber, all of the medicine, all of the fuel, and all of the food that the society consumed. That's what farming is you raise those four basic categories, fiber, food, medicine, and fuel, and you sell them in the cities. They're the basic necessities of life. The money flows out of the cities back to the landowner and to the producer, where land is the means of production of wealth. It's been that way for thousands of years. Today, 100 years later, the farmer doesn't produce any fiber. If they do, it's cotton, which accounts for 50% of the pesticides and herbicides used in the agricultural sector. The farmer doesn't raise any medicine. It's all been monopolized by the pharmaceutical companies. The farmer doesn't raise any fuel. It's all been monopolized by the petrochemical companies. And if you go into a grocery store and look at the ingredients on the package, you'll find out how rapidly the farmer is being displaced from their heritage of food production. It's all been taken over by the synthetic manufacturers who, in producing these synthetic products, create the toxic waste and the hazardous byproducts with which we're having such a tough time dealing. And not only that, it concentrates wealth in the hands of fewer and fewer people all the time, because the means of production of wealth is no longer the land. It is now the factories and the shareholders and the people who own the controlling interest in those corporations. Does the government have the right to tell man or woman that they cannot plant a seed in God's green earth and consume the green natural plant that comes up out of it? That seems such an inalienable right. That seems such a natural and basic way of communing with Mother Earth and with the natural cycle of things.
This situation of not being able to use the world's most useful plant freely is not normal. Prohibition has come after thousands of years of healthy coexistence with cannabis hemp. Let us once again coexist with cannabis hemp in a healthy way, for now hemp is making a rapid comeback to serve us at a critical time with huge potential benefits for our civilization and our environment. Hemp paper is a solution for the problems of deforestation and pollution associated with our wood for paper industry. Hemp textile production is a solution for the problems of chemical use in our cotton industry. Hemp building materials is a solution to build with a negative carbon footprint. Hemp seeds are a solution to alleviate hunger in poor countries and to provide easily digestible whole protein, vitamins and minerals to all people. Hemp seed oil is a solution for deficiencies in omega-3 essential fatty acid in modern diets. Hemp medicine is a solution to alleviate many ailments for many people. Cannabis hemp is a solution for a sustainable future. Let us honour and appreciate this great gift from the plant kingdom.
Okay. Okay, well, that's good. The whole thing, I think we're back now, and that's really good. The whole so well done. You put it together, I presume, or you had people putting it together?
Yes, I mainly put it together, but with a lot of help.
All right, that's very good.
Yeah.
Because it's just all good. We could play the hour and a half easy. It's all good, and what you're saying is really good. And congratulations on achieving that. And it's getting around. And it's. Did you put it up on the YouTube or some sort of thing for general distribution?
I've got a 15-minute trailer on YouTube that just compresses it all down, because I put it all up on YouTube in the beginning, and I found that there were a lot of people watching the first section but not getting all the way through. So I've just compressed it into 15 minutes.
That's interesting.
And you can punch in the Hemp Solution 15-minute trailer.
And
that's up on
what
YouTube
did you
now.
put in the 15-minute trailer?
Oh, just a little selection of the whole.
That's really interesting to me, because you get a
little synopsis of it.
People are used to moving very quickly.
Yeah, the attention
we're getting
span.
what they call Norbert Wiener was in the. I had a friend who was in the room with Norbert Wiener in 1948 when they coined the term fibre. It means steersman in Greek. And Norbert Wiener said information overload permits pattern recognition.
Yeah.
And people are being inundated now because of the digital revolution that's just transforming everything.
Yeah.
They're being inundated with information, and so attention spans are very brief.
That's right.
And they're moving quickly, and they're also it's also moving. Unlike the history of communication, which was very linear in most of our more or less recent background, McLuhan and that sort of thing, it's moving very rapidly multisensorial. Harvard Medical College says that memories and thoughts are much more successfully navigated by the 10 to the 11th power neurons in the human brain with axons and all that by multisensorial or multimedia presentation. The world's moving multimedia, and they're moving to a quick attention span and that kind of thing. So it's interesting that they don't have patience for long things going on.
So the YouTube 15-minute cut's definitely a big part of
it used to be you could put any, if your grandfather, I can put, this program will be on YouTube by tomorrow.
Oh, great.
And it'll be up the whole thing, the hour. And it's long, it's an hour long. And another guest we're going to do in this session, we had over 2 million, almost 3 million views of an hour-long conversation. No naked ladies, no dancing bears, no graphics exploding, or anything that seems to engage the consciousness. Just academic talk about Iran.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
And
it's a wonderful.
That's odd, though. It isn't, but it's characteristic of the thing. Information overload permits pattern, which means we can begin to look for patterns. That's why I was saying before, the hemp thing is really important, really interesting, and it's happening. And Joe and so forth, they're able to question the authorities who have been coming with scold, get in that prison cell, and you nasty this and that. And that's really changing, and that's a major thing.
It is.
And they're having to come to address that, and they're challenging that system, and that's very encouraging.
Well, as Gatewood Garbra says just in that cut, the federal government never had the power to prohibit. That's what he says. He's a lawyer. So they brought in the marijuana prohibition with a tax act that they had to just tax it because they knew that it's not our right. It wasn't a legal right of our species, being Homo sapiens, to call another species evil or to say that it wouldn't be allowed to grow on
in that
this
case,
planet.
cannabis, you mean?
Yes, it's just simply not a legal foundation for the prohibition of another species in the first place, because all the species that came onto this planet, independently of us, they were God-given or Mother Nature-given, whatever you call it. It's not up for us humans to stomp out other species on the planet, but to learn how to live in harmony with all of them.
But do you understand that 99.9% of the species ever existed have gone extinct since 3.8 billion years ago when the organic process first got started?
Yes.
And we're coming to a point, and then we come up the hominoid line, and here we are now. We've got a self-reflective consciousness, and we can extend our capability, and we can lord it over all of the species there, and we have a tremendous capability now. I don't want to bring up the point, but the weapon systems now, by modeling, are species lethal. They're now to the point where, unlike as recent as the Second World War, they would be some survivors of an unleashing of our abstract technological capability to destroy one another with, we did firebombing and that. So we're in an existential new reality in the universe at that level. And a lot of other things would be subsumed under that, but that's a big transformation. And on the other side, the opposite side, or the living side of that, there's modeling. We've transcended material scarcity since about 1970 in both cases. 1970 wasn't just sex, drugs, and rock and roll. It was a big, major transformation happening in the evolution of universal consciousness, or extended. That's what I'm getting at when I said the 1970 is going to be year one. If we make it and don't destroy it.
Well,
are you optimistic for the human prospect, or do you think we're going to just blow it all up?
No, I'm really optimistic because we're a product of this society. We're a product of the evolution. We being conscious, awake human beings that have active compassion and active clarity at a universal level, not at exclusive level.
We don't have it at a universal level.
But we do. You do.
No.
Enough people are starting to.
Oh, okay. Well, that's a thing perhaps that might be possible, that there could be some comprehensive understanding of what's going on.
Well, that's the change for me. That's the quality of change that is emerging.
And the marijuana is part of that.
Yeah, it's part of a pattern of thinking that says, oh my God, this is insane.
Right.
You know, you get educated, you get activated, and you start to, fundamentally, funnel in a sane body of power, of thinking, of feeling, of acting,
and it's part
of
of
responding.
But with
everything, I mean, it's the same with everything. If you decide that, all our paradigms, like you say, paradigm, that shift is a sane, open heart, mind connected, conscious being just going, phoom. How do we respond at a time like this when we could destroy ourselves like that?
Well, first of all, it would be good if it was mentioned or brought up once in a while, and then particularly the other side, which is never mentioned, never brought up by anybody, that it's very likely from modeling, we have, since about 1970, transcended material scarcity. There is enough for all. No, there has not been. We've lived in a condition of scarcity. All of our institutions were formulated in a condition of scarcity, including understanding. We didn't know about neurotransmitters. We didn't know about genome. We didn't know about these things, but we do now. And there's been a qualitative transformation at the level of capability to destroy and also to provide for everybody. But all of our institutions are outdated, out of history. So it's the thing like in evolution, you have a thing where you come steady state, you're in a thing, and then there's a quickening. It's like the birth canal. And then there comes punctuated equilibrium, and the new relationship comes. But what we've tried to do is say that new relationship we know all about because Jesus told us about, or the spiritual, or the great white walrus for the Eskimos. We have all these things that we had to deal with, self-reflective consciousness, but we don't have a system in place that the future requires for a liberated order for the human society within an ecological context which is available to us now where it has not been historically. We don't have that in our leadership, and for want of we don't have a system that the future requires in our political or economic or even intellectual leadership. Particularly the intellectual leadership is all tunnel visioned out on various issues.
I would disagree, Harold. I think
good. Disagree.
In Australia, let me disagree. We have recently, the Green Party in Australia now has the balance of power in our Senate.
Is that true?
And we have also the first Green member in our lower house that we call it the House of Representatives. The Green movement in Australia is I would say, an example on a political and sustainability level, that new consciousness. And that's happening around the world. It's not just the Green Party, but there's a lot of progressive thinking of sustainable living, how we as a planet can live as a people in harmony with all other species so that all beings might be truly happy.
Under a green rubric, are we going to live in harmony with the Illuminati or the people who own all the capital assets and run the world?
Absolutely.
How are we going to subsume the outdated institutions like education and everything?
But there's a big sacred death happening here. I mean, there is a quality of change that you know, the devolution, you know, the things that are totally not sane and not, you know, full of the growth and possibilities of what we know is true, you know, miraculously and potently will and are, whether it looks like little tiny bits, falling away, being burnt up in a clarity and in an enlightenment that is occurring at a grassroots level.
Well, okay, grassroots, I hope so. I hope you're right. It's not the grassroots unless they get into some sort of...
Let's check out a little bit of paradise.
Let me just mention to the audience, you have a computer here and you've got some pictures of your home and that kind of thing, and we're going to come in on that. So let's talk about it. Maybe you could set it up a little slideshow.
Well, this is our town. That's our house there, that yellow one there. And we have a lovely mountain up behind us, an old volcano. The village is called Central Tilba. It's 5 hours south of Sydney. And that's our little shop called Gulaga Gallery, named after Gulaga Mountain, which is the Aboriginal name for the mountain behind us. And in our shop we've got hemp clothes and also hemp seed oil products. So this is made from hemp seeds. The oil of the hemp seed is very nutritious, makes fantastic cosmetics.
I understand.
And also nutritious for eating and as well.
Right. Is this all Australian grown?
This is Australia.
Yes.
Okay, good.
This is Susie Wilkerson, who grows a big crop of hemp in Queensland, and we get all our cosmetics
That's
from
not hemp around her.
That's
like trees.
Look at the size of that. They're trees.
That's transformation for you, Harold.
They're huge plants.
That's growth.
Okay.
Huge
that's possibility.
This is also in my state of New South Wales. That's a big harvester harvesting a crop. This crop was grown in a sewage treatment plant with just effluent, raw sewage and effluent feeding the crop, and it produced 18 tonnes of hemp fibre per acre. Just in one season.
Okay, that's good.
That's
a harvesting machine there.
This is the hemp industry in China, where we've talked about all our textiles are coming from now. This is the
Grow hemp for the war.
That's what the United States government encouraged US farmers to do in 1942. This is the biggest hemp building, the Adnams Brewery in England. And that's me.
That's using those bales that you were talking about of hemp building material.
Hemp blocks.
That is the hemp blocks.
That's very interesting.
It's using hemp blocks, and they also just
put
up
green. It looks like
that's the roof.
Turf
they've put turf on the roof, which also helps the insulation. So this is a beer brewery, but it doesn't need any air conditioner. It keeps cool.
Well, it breathes. It literally breathes.
Okay, that's good.
Breathe.
That's building in association and design with nature and that sort of thing. That's all very good. At a level of design.
So this
and
is
their capabilities.
This is a great template for industrial building in the future.
Right.
It's a fantastic example. Adnams Brewery.
Again, one of those patterns of coming into harmony with nature. You know, which you know is an example there. But again, as a major influence psychologically and spiritually for human beings to remember, oh my God, I've just lost my connection for a minute there, you know, with the earth. And as we remember to reconnect, you know, we start to feel and think differently.
99.9% of the species that ever existed have gone extinct. You don't think there's any chance that we're going to do that? That's what I'm saying. It's not going to do any good to have all of this if somebody starts the thing off, because we'll have nothing to say about it.
I think it's
not in our hands. The power structures in the finish the slideshow. Okay.
Going on. That's me in Nepal, far western Nepal, and this is this is where cannabis came from. So I thought I had to go to the Himalayas and find out where.
That's where it originates.
Yeah.
That would be a climax vegetation, they say in geography. Yeah.
Okay. And this is a sadhu in Kathmandu, saying a prayer for Shiva, who they believe brought cannabis from the Himalayas for human enjoyment. It's in the Vedas, And this is just one photo depicting prohibition. This is actually in Lebanon. The United States drug policy of prohibition has not only affected the United States, but affected every country in the world. And this invasion and destruction of the Lebanese ancient hemp crop happened during the first Gulf War at the behest of the President Bush Sr. So that's just an example of prohibition and its effects throughout the world.
91, 92, Yeah, we did an ambassador of Iraq then.
And that's just a poster.
That's a poster. That's not, did you design it?
Yeah, that's good.
That's wonderful.
That's the poster for the old version that was released in '95 called the Hemp Revolution.
Did you design is that your design or no? Or
well, I just came up with this idea of using the the fuel, paper, medicine, inspiration, textiles.
The design was there before?
Food and oil.
No, he designed the image.
You came up with that concept of...
Did you have the sun and everything? Who designed this?
A friend of mine did this, put the sun in there in the mountain.
Group activity, right?
Group
You got together and put that together.
It's been a collaboration.
That's the new cover.
That's the thing for the cover for the thing. It's available everywhere, I guess, or is it available on the internet?
No, it's not available everywhere.
It's not. Okay.
But it's available at thehempsolution.com.au.
The hempsolution.com.au. That's for Australia, right?
That's right.
Okay, good. And it's getting a good distribution, I would think, because it's riding this. You're surf riding.
Yes.
A thing that's happening, which is a positive thing that can be seen, linked into the green things here. The Green Party here is not very powerful in terms of the United States. I'm happy to hear they are there. They are some other places.
Yeah, it's been quite popular.
It's very much in the air. It's very progressive to be green and be in touch with nature and so forth, and all of those kind of things. So there are some slivers of hope, maybe, but...
There definitely are, and I think the United States needs to look outside of its borders on that level to see what hope is happening in Europe and Australia and New Zealand, other places like that, where a voice for the Green Party or sustainable thinking is taking a more solid
Sustainable
route.
thinking is part of it, but still they don't have a critique of a paradigm, and particularly at the level of economics. It's still, we live like serfs on a feudal estate. The assets are all owned by a tiny class, as always they have. They go along with all the cattle that's sold when a duke loses the estate in a crap game. It's still very much, James Joyce said, history is a nightmare of injustice. It still is unjust. Mr. Carter said that. We don't have vision from our political leadership, and the intellectuals, it seemed to me, are getting off, if you get one thing, they're getting tunnel visioned into if they just get one thing done or something, but we don't have an overall thing. So I can't be so optimistic Pollyanishly so, because some good things are going on. It's not going to do any good unless we get a comprehensive thing. We got to relate to the whole economic system, how we're going to finance, how we're going to form capital, how we're going to distribute demand. We got a jobless recovery here in the United States that's confronting us that is very upsetting, because they only can relate to the masses of the people of having some sort of a job to get money, and the assets are all owned by a tiny plutocratic class in every political entity in the world. Discontent is growing. They're going to be confronted with massive technologically induced. If an algorithm can get rid of 10,000 jobs without, in market terms, it's not going to work in the traditional way in which they have a recovery. So there are these larger issues at a political level, of which I'm happy to see this was there, but it's not sufficient to what the future requires, and it's still the intellectuals, in my humble opinion. The intellectuals are falling down on the job in terms of comprehensive paradigm. This is one paradigm. Paradigm.
Well, Harold, this
shifts.
could be...
There's no vision.
This could be the difference between our survival and not survival as a
I
human
don't
race.
quite see that. How is it going to do you any good to do that if they unleash the weapons?
But surely
how is it going to do you any good to have your farm in lovely Australia
unleash the weapons, there might be few of us.
If you do not have, if they unleash the weapons of destruction that could be done at any moment.
But don't we
how do we deal with that?
Don't we need to make a shift? We need to make those paradigm shifts that you speak of from an intellectual perspective.
Yes, and that's who's falling down on the job.
But to a spiritual perspective.
They've been co-opted. The intellectuals have been co-opted.
But your own capacity, your intellectual capacity, which is quietly brilliant, has an ever-deepening capacity to actually have an even more cosmic perspective about yourself. If you have that perspective about yourself, and you really rise in perspective, you really rise up you expand your horizons really deeply about yourself, and have an internal capacity of enlightenment and a revelatory experience about yourself, then you will have hope, because everyone is capable of that.
Oh, there's hope, but it's very dim. It's very dim. I think the odds are we're going to blow it up.
But not hope in
because
an old
we're not
paradigm.
going to get over our enthrallment to the past. With the past institutions, they're so comfortable. to go back to the past.
But it's still all mind. It's still all mind. Until you get out of that paradigm, you cannot have a direct experience.
No, not me get out of it. The universe.
She's talking about you.
I'm talking about you.
No, I don't think it has anything to do with the individual.
But it does have to do with the human being.
Well, we disagree. I don't think it has anything to do with the individual. That's just narcissism.
How can we make a change, though, if it isn't about the individual realizing its collective self?
There's an awakening happening, Harold.
We're all one.
There's a lot of people waking up.
It's not a fragmented thing.
To a higher consciousness.
It's a unified perspective. And you
Has anybody, does anybody ever mention that it may be modeled that we have transcended material scarcity as an ontologic reality? Why is that never mentioned? Looking at the whole. Why do they never do it? They take aspects of it. Why do they never look at, like Bucky Fuller or some of the comprehensive thinkers? Why do they never bring that up? And why isn't it letters this high going around Central Times Square? It's never mentioned.
Maybe because that little bit of evolutionary depth and growth needs to happen so the individual can see more comprehensively.
Why isn't it said? Why isn't it said anywhere? Why is there no comprehensive reading of what's going on?
Well,
that's what I'm asking.
That's
why they're falling down on the job.
Question.
It's because they've probably got an economic interest in making a buck by putting out something about one little part of what's going on, rather than considering what really is going on in a non-spiritual context. Just material reality. That's all.
But
material reality.
Spirituality is like, if it's dualistic, if it's seen in the dualistic, if the mind is reigning supreme, looking at the right and wrong, the up and down, the good and bad, it is a crazy, psychotic, insane force. It has to be transformed. That whole paradigm of the way you use your mind until it becomes a unified perspective and your mind is somehow touched.
Yeah.
99.9%
of the species have gone.
Well, let yourself be the one that doesn't.
No, it's not.
Blow yourself
up. Okay, happy. We've run out of time. I'm sorry. We got another program we got to do. Thanks a lot.
It's lovely.
Bon voyage.
Yeah,
Get home safe to Australia.
Yeah.
Babe, it's such a great movie. I tell you, made Australia look great. Your pleasure to have those perceptions, and we're going to get on with other programs that we have
thanks
to do.
for having us on. It's
My
great.
pleasure. Okay,
really
thank
good.
you for
Thank you.
Good.
Okay.
Very appreciated.
It's a wonderful discussion.
That individual view of self.
Well, no.
Spiritual.
It's a word that is provocative.
Oh, God.
Wakey. You're learning to be a cameraman, or you are a cameraman?
I'm just this is part of the class is to start producing.
Okay, we're out of here.
All right.
Great show.
Thank you. Great show. Good luck, enjoy it.
Thank you very much.
I'll be out
I loved everything.
Okay.
Yeah, it's great to be part of it all.
Yeah.
Let me say goodbye to Shanti.
We told you Harold's tough.